to be asked to speak after that splendid oration, full of wisdom and experience. It really is an honour. And I would have found it more difficult if I hadn't had the good fortune to talk both to Dr. Andrew Maczek and to Marga, and to talk with both of them about their father. Both of them with their brilliant minds and their unfailing Polish courtesy. Polish courtesy which I experienced myself with the General when he was all of 102. And there he was, this distinguished General, this remarkable, very modest figure, sitting in his chair. And he kissed my hand as if I were the important one. I shall always remember that. John Paul II spoke of him as a hero, a champion of Poland. And the Dutch called him a diamond. They wanted to give him the diamond, but he wouldn't accept it. So they had a good trick. They gave it to Marga, and she wears it on her finger. There were just two things that I want to say about him. The love that his men had for him, and the treatment that we British gave him. Shabby treatment in the extreme. In 1981, largely under the aegis of Zbigniew Mieszkowski, the memorial in Duns Park was raised for the 127 men of the Polish Armored Division who had died. And General Maczek was there, and also Sir Alec Douglas Hume was there, two distinguished men. And I might just say that when Churchill returned from Yalta, where he together with a dying Roosevelt, and he as a very elderly man who travelled hundreds of kilometres after their plane had landed to be with the cock of the walk, Mr. Joseph Stalin. When Churchill returned from that dreadful happening and said to the House of Commons that a just settlement had been arranged and agreed on, Lord Dunglass, as Alec Douglas Hume was then, he got up and said, it wasn't just, it was expedient. A good, honest Scotsman. They had gone to fight for their freedom and for ours, and after that, their freedom had been traded away, but they still went on fighting for our freedom. And then after the war, Churchill was no longer Prime Minister. Mr. Attlee was the Prime Minister, whom Churchill spoke of as a sheep in sheep's clothing. And at the Victory Parade, though there had been Polish naval vessels, there had been 2 bomber squadrons, there had been 2 fighter squadrons. You remember that 1 in 8 of the pilots in the Battle of Britain was a Pole. There were the 2 corps, the 1st Corps under General Maczek, the 2nd Corps under General Anders. There were the parachutists, and then besides all of that, there were about 600,000 people in the Home Army, in the underground army in Poland. The parachutists were asked to walk in the Victory Parade in the summer of 1946. None of the others was asked. None of the others was asked. So can you understand it that the parachutists wouldn't walk when the Poles were demobbed, at least in Attlee's favour, one must say that he wouldn't repatriate them to Poland as Stalin wanted. He did set up the Resettlement Corps, which meant that the Polish soldiers, though no longer bearing arms, were allowed to stay. What did they get when they were demobbed? They certainly didn't get any pension. They got a hat and a coat and maybe a couple of quid, I think. And they had to report to the police every fortnight or so. These were men who had guarded our coast, as you saw on the map that we've just been looking at. They were asked to report to the police. No wonder a whole lot of them took British nationality, not out of gratitude to Britain, but just in order to be able to live ordinarily. General Maczek himself, his first job was a co-op storeman in Gifford, and then he went and became a barman in one of his soldiers' hotels. And I love the story of, you know, double whiskey, general, and saluting and all that. He was held in enormous affection by his men. And this was brought home to me very particularly because when the wall had fallen, and 10 years after the unveiling of the Polish War Memorial in Duns, we had another sort of celebration of the 10 years. Then Poland was no longer behind the Iron Curtain. And so with our chairman of our district council, who's here today, Captain Evans, and also with Dr. Trefas's predecessor, Mr. Dobrowolski, it was arranged that we in Duns should twin with the town in Poland. I mean, we're only a couple of thousand strong, and they're 32,000 strong. Żagań is quite big. But I always felt that even a finger can open a heavy door. So although we were small, I think we thought it would be good. And why Żagań was chosen was because the colours and traditions of the divisions, the armoured divisions which had been in Duns and in the area around Berwickshire where Duns is situated, their colours and traditions had been transferred to Żagań. And so we arranged for that twinning. And on our first big visit from them, they have a children's orchestra there. So I may say we were scurrying around finding accommodation for a whole orchestra of children. And it was quite a challenge, I must say. So a big bus arrived, 42 strong it was, and some of them were grown-ups, an awful lot of them were children, all their musical instruments. But among them was a general from the Jan Sobieski barracks in Żagań, General Bortnowski. And his great, great wish was to see General Maczek. This was in the summer of 1994, and the general died later that year. He was 102. So we didn't know whether it would be possible. The thing was, ring up on Sunday morning, and if he's okay, then come. So we rang up on Sunday morning, and then we into Edinburgh we went. And I shall never, ever forget General Bortnowski kneeling at the feet of General Maczek, kissing his hands and weeping.
Thank you very much for your words. Thanks a lot.